Hey friends, welcome to Around the House. I'm Tanya and today's video is all about garden planning. I pulled a chair down into the garden and I've just been sitting and looking at the space and sketching and brainstorming what we want to grow this year, what we really liked last year, what we didn't, and what I want to do this year. So come along and I'll share that process with you. Let me take you over to where something is already planted. It's been planted since October and it's one of the most rewarding crops I've ever grown, and it's garlic. So this bed here, we planted in October and the little garlic shoots are coming up. So that's gonna stay pretty much undisturbed until we harvest that in like June or July. Most likely, I'm gonna end up putting bush beans in there after we pull up the garlic because bush beans germinate really quickly. You can grow them late into the summer and it'll also give me a good harvest for the freezer. We have 4 trellises in our garden. We have 3 smaller ones here and then our larger trellis along the back side of the garden. In the fall, we raked all the leaves up on our property and we brought a lot of them down into the garden. That was to create a living mulch. It breaks down, it feeds the soil. It also creates a mulch for any weeds that want to come up in the spring, and it just creates a really healthy ecosystem. So I want to show you how it's broken down. And you can see there's pieces, but look at that beautiful soil under there. I mean, the fact that it's January and I can pick it and crumble it is just, oh, it makes me excited. Because we do a no-till method, I do not remove these trellises. They stay in place. I do try to rotate what I grow on them. Like last year, pole beans were grown on the middle one. So this year I'm gonna plant cucumbers on that one because pole beans are really good at fixing nitrogen in the soil, so cucumbers will like that spot. Over here in the larger one, we have had tomatoes on that wall. It's really the only place that I have to grow a long wall of tomatoes. So what I have found is because they're in the same place every year, I amend the soil really good. I put down a lot of compost. I do that twice in the season. I put a banana and an egg in each hole when I plant. We have a video for that if you want to check that out. It's a really informative video that will grow you lots of tomatoes. So I just make sure that if I'm putting something in the same space, I amend the soil really good. The long one here will have cucumbers along this year. We ate so many cucumbers last year, and my husband and Rachel both said, make sure you grow the pickle cucumbers. So I'm growing all pickle cucumbers this year. I think I have like 10 in the works to put on this trellis and the trellis that is on the back wall there, which these two get a little bit of afternoon shade, which cucumbers like to have some shade, so they'll really thrive in these spots this year. Last year on the edge of the garden here, we planted potatoes for the first time, which was so fun. If you want to see us harvesting those, you can check out this video here. That was super fun, and I will definitely grow potatoes again. But in this space for this year, I'm gonna make a very dense wall of sunflowers and zinnias. Part of gardening for me is really creating a space that I love to be in, that looks pretty. Rachel really wants to do a flower business again this summer, so we're gonna make sure there's enough of flowers for her to pick and sell in the neighborhood. So this is gonna look really pretty. When you think about like seed packets, a lot of times the spacings for paths are based on you running a tractor through or a tiller. Well, we have a no-till garden and it's just our home backyard garden. So all I need to make sure is the walkway is big enough for me to walk through. So it's gonna be a small walkway here, and then we're gonna go here and I'm gonna plant some okra. Okra also grow really tall. So it'll be the sunflowers really tall and it'll tear down the okra, and we're gonna grow a lot of okra this year. We loved eating fresh raw okra. I was always under the impression that I didn't like okra until I grew it. And then we're gonna make a small little walkway again right here. And we're gonna plant some summer squash and winter squash, some pumpkins. And the thought process behind that is that the winter squash will kind of vine out and they will go into the flowers and create like a ground cover. They might climb up the sunflowers a little bit, which I'm not too worried about. but they'll kind of trail out. I'll make them go that way, and if they end up going into the yard, that's fine too. Then we're gonna make a little bit, well, I got these back. I'm still working out the kinks. We're gonna leave a tiny little path, and then along the walkway here, I am planting my lunchbox peppers. The thought process behind that is, it's okay. Do you hear our kids? They're playing in the creek, which is prime time garden planting time. So along the walkway here, I am planting lunchbox peppers. They're tiny little peppers. They come in red and orange and yellow, and they are delicious. We all love eating them fresh. And so my thought process of planting them along this path, one, I grew lima beans here last year, and lima beans, because they're in the bean family, fix the nitrogen in the soil, so peppers grow really well after a bean being planted in the ground. And I want my kids to come down and pick them and not trample on anything, because it's one of the things they'll eat out of the garden fresh. And so if it's right along the path, it's right there for their little hands to grab and eat and harvest. So that's the pepper row. Then we'll jump over to the other side of the garden. Right here on the other side of the path, I am planting my bell peppers. Kind of the same thought process. We eat a lot of bell peppers fresh. They're harvested a lot for dinner, so I often send the kids down to the garden to harvest them. I want them to be in reach of their little hands. So this whole row along the path will be bell peppers. Bell peppers love to hold hands, so I plant them fairly close, and they support one another against high winds, and they just grow better that way into like a bush. So bell peppers along the path. Then we're gonna hop over, create a little bit of a walkway. So like right in here are all my determinate tomatoes. They were on that side of the garden this year, so I'm bringing them back here where I had them 2 years ago, and they're gonna go in cages kind of in the middle of this bed here. Determinate tomatoes, basically they have a determined amount that they grow. They grow into like a bush, so I do put a tomato cage on them, and they produce all their fruit at once. Then we're gonna step over to the giant tomato trellis. This is where all of my interdeterminate tomatoes will go. They will climb this trellis way, way higher than it even is, and they will produce lots of fruit. I'm going to plant 12 along this trellis. This trellis is, I have the measurement, 206 inches long. I measure it by inches because tomatoes then get planted 16 inches apart, and that will get me my tomatoes on this trellis. Last year I planted a really thick hedge of basil underneath the tomatoes, making sure that there was some in between each. And the basil, one, loves some of the shade from the tomatoes and not being in like the scorching southern heat that we get here. And it grew so tall. It was some of the best basil I had, and it really kept the weeds down around the tomatoes. So I'm planning on doing that again, just a really thick row of basil underneath the tomatoes, and planting some nasturtiums, because nasturtiums are a pest trap plant, and they will draw the aphids rather than the aphids going on the tomatoes. Again, I've done that in past years, and I have had really good luck with not having aphids on my tomato plants. That's the plan for this trellis. And then the border of the garden, every year I plant a border of marigolds along the front and along the side. And one, it's beautiful. Two, marigolds are a great companion plant. They help to deter pests. They also help fight nematodes in the soil. And it's just a really good plant to have. Also, if you feed them to your chickens get more yellow yolks. So I always plant a ton of marigolds in the garden. This little space here has kind of become my perennial patch over the years. This briar of little twigs here is oregano, and it'll come back really strong in the spring. And then there's lemon thyme in there. There is holy basil that resows every year. So this space will really fill out as like a perennial herb garden. There's echinacea in the back, and then I always just throw in sunflowers in empty spots to make it pretty, because we always have some kind of seat here, and it's just fun to sit in a lovely space. I hope you all enjoyed garden planning with me. This is my first one of the season, like coming down and checking out the space and writing it out. So things might change, and they often change when I actually do the planting. That's okay if you're the same way. Just because you put it down on paper doesn't mean it has to stay that way, concrete, until you plant. So give yourself some freedom there. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. We'll see you next time.